All right, thank you so much for joining me today. It's wonderful to imagine you all with. So what we're going to be doing today is building up from our analysis of individual firms' optimal choices, given some set of input prices, output prices, and technology of production, and using it to understand the supply of goods to a market. So we'll start by understanding the supply of an individual firm to the market, and then we'll build out to understand market supply overall, right? Aggregate market supply. Now, the reason that this is a valuable thing to do, the reason this is important, is just like with consumers. When we take this leap from understanding the decision of an individual firm to understanding the way that firms interact with markets, it allows us to draw insights on all sorts of really, really important questions. If you think that you might want to run a business in the future, this can help you understand things like, under what circumstances can you expect to earn a profit in a competitive market? Should you expect profits to last long term? And if so, why? Likewise, if you're interested in policy, right, or you're interested in helping markets function more efficiently, this is going to help you make decisions like, or understand questions like, if I impose new regulations or workplace protections that increase the costs of production in a certain industry, under what circumstances is that going to have fairly minor effects on employment or minor effects on wages? Under what circumstances are those going to have larger effects on wages, right? In what circumstances is it better to intervene in a market to provide someone with goods and services directly versus to simply tax wealthier people and transfer money to less wealthy people? So that's what we're doing today. I hope you find it interesting. Okay, so where we're going to start today is by thinking about the supply of an individual firm, right, in the short run. So the firm's short run supply, which is to say that our goal is some function Q of P, right? To know at some price P, how much output is the firm going to supply, right? What's Q of P? The good news is we've actually already done 99% of the work in the last lecture. And to show you that, let's remind ourselves where we left off. So we said we created this wonderful cost curve graph, right, where we have Q down here, dollars here, right? We had marginal costs like this. Then we said we'll have average variable cost that starts out above marginal cost because marginal cost is declining, hits its minimum when it crosses marginal cost and looks something like this. And we had average total cost. Right, same basic shape. Yeah, looks familiar? So our goal, right, is to know how much output we're going to produce at some given price. So why don't I pick a price and see what we think. Say that I picked a price, I'm going to call this 50. How much will we produce? Well, we'll just produce the output where price equals marginal cost. We're going to call this 8, just to put some numbers on this, right? We just produce where price equals marginal cost. Do we always produce where price equals marginal cost? No, we have to make sure that we're better off doing that than not producing at all. So we check to see if price is above average variable cost at the level of output we'll produce. In this case, we're good to go, right? So at a price of 50, we would produce Q equals 8. How about if I lower the price a little? Say like this. Same deal, right? I'm going to look where price equals marginal cost. So what this means is, if I graphed my supply, right, the amount of output the firm's going to produce at any given price, it's just going to look like the line we've already drawn, right? We're going to have a market supply that's just given by our marginal cost curve, as long as that price is above where marginal cost equals average variable cost, right? So that price is greater than average variable cost. So our supply is just going to be MC of Q equals P, right? So long as P greater than ABC, greater than or equal to ABC of Q, which implies, and is implied by, MC of Q greater than or equal to ABC of Q. Right? So all we have to do is find the point at which MC of Q equals ABC of Q. That's the minimum price at which we produce anything. And then above that, we just invert our marginal cost curve. So let's do a specific example so that this makes a little more sense. Let's say that we had a cost curve. Let's start with a fairly simple cost curve. Like, let's say 10Q squared plus 20. Cool? Then we'd say, okay, we've got a marginal cost. It's just equal to 20Q. Right? So the first thing we do, if MC of Q equals 20Q, we're going to find our supply by setting this equal to P. So we'll say MCQ equals P, 20Q equals P, Q equals P over 20. Then we have to confirm, right? We've got to figure out what our minimum price is, at which we'll produce anything, right? Where our supply curve starts, which we can do by finding our ABC, which is just going to be C of Q minus C of 0 over Q. So in this case, that's just going to be 10Q. Right? We can find our minimum quantity. So this piece here right, we can find our minimum quantity by saying ABCQ equals MCQ for minimum quantity. Right, so this is just going to be, in this case, very straightforward. 10Q equals 20Q, Q equals 0. So the minimum price is just going to be the marginal cost at a Q equals 0, right? We're just reading across the graph. So MC of 0, which is 0. So in this case, right, because of the fact that we'll produce at any price above 0, we can say that our final answer is just going to be this, right? It's just going to be Q of P equals P over 20. Great. So basic steps, right? Find our marginal cost curve, invert it so that we get a function of Q in terms of P, and then find the minimum price at which we're going to be able to produce anything by setting average variable cost equal to marginal cost. Awesome. And there we go, right? We're done. We found our firm supply curve. So if that's a firm supply curve in the long run, let's think about what the market supply is going to look like in the long run. The answer is it's going to be very straightforward. Just like when we were looking for, in the short run, just like we were looking for market demand in consumer theory by adding all of our individual demand curves horizontally, we're going to do exactly the same thing when it comes to firms. So if we had 100 identical firms, each of which had demand curve like the one we just had, right, P over 20, we would say our market demand would just be Q of P equals 100 times P over 20 equals 5P. Right, graphically, if we have an individual firm like this, right, if we add horizontally, we're going to make our slope flatter and flatter and flatter, because at each price, right, as we increase the price, we'll increase market supply by more than an individual supply. So we'll end up with our market supply, Q of P, looking like this, right? Being a lot flatter than individual supply. Awesome. And what if we had a bunch of different firms? Right, so let's say that I had Q and a P like this. I've got firms that are producing the same thing, but have different technologies of production. Let's say I've got a blue firm producing like this. And then I've got a red firm that's a little bit less productive. So it's going to start producing at a higher price and produce less at any given price. Just like with consumer theory, right, we're going to add horizontally to find our market supply. So I'll say, up until here, I'm going to only have the blue firm producing. Here, I'm going to add the output of the red firm. So my supply curve is going to jump out a little bit. right? And then it's going to have a less steep slope because we're going to be adding together these two. So I'll end up with a market supply curve like this. Now, one thing I want to point out, in this case, if this is the supply curve that I have, this is supposed to be a horizontal line, by the way. This is the market supply curve that I have. I could potentially have one of these firms making a profit or at least earning a producer surplus when the other firm is not. So let's say that my market price was right here. The red firm, right, isn't going to earn any producer surplus at all because the price is exactly equal to the minimum price at which they're willing to produce. In other words, as you can see, right, there's no area that is above their supply curve but below the price. For the blue firm, though, we do have this whole area above the supply curve and below the price, which I'll call producer surplus, at a price of P. Why is this producer surplus? Because for each unit sold, it's going to be the difference between the minimum price at which I was willing to sell the unit, which, by the way, is going to be the marginal cost of that unit, right? And the price that I was actually able to get for this unit. So this area here is going to be the money I earn from being in the market at a price of P as compared to being out of the market entirely. Okay, great. So there we go, right? We've handled the short run now. We've built our individual and market supply curves in the short run. So in the next video, we're going to think about how this story changes when we look at the long run.